Welcome back to A Bite from the Money Sandwich, where we provide practical and easy to understand tips and ideas on how to manage your money better, so as to let you retire with comfort and on your own terms. Ever wondered how someone could lose their life savings to a scam? Today, I am joined by Tracy Hall, author, keynote speaker, and senior marketing executive, who has most recently become known as the famous last victim of Hamish McLaren, arguably Australia's most prolific con man. Tracy lost $317,000 and for a time, her ability to trust. Now, she shares her story of resilience and recovery. Tracy discusses not only her personal experience, but also the larger issues of global scams, victim blaming, and the emotional toll fraud can take. From spotting red flags to rebuilding trust, Tracy's insights provide invaluable lessons on safeguarding yourself and your finances. With her new memoir, The Last Victim, Tracy aims to educate and raise awareness about scams while offering hope to others who may have been deceived. Well, welcome, Tracy, to the show.
Hi, Mark. How are you?
Very well, thank you. And I'm not going to put any pressure, but I've had a few people who I was telling they're inviting you on the show, and they're very keen to hear this. So I hope I do it justice for you.
I hope I do it justice for them.
Yes. Well, I've only just started reading your book, The Last Victim, and I do encourage anyone to read that, male or female, because we're all susceptible to fraud. And I can already see the incredibly tough journey it was. And it's really great that you can share your personal experience with fraud. But I was even saying to you before, you're not what I picture a standard fraud victim to look like. You know, you're obviously clever. And would really like to know, what do you feel made you initially vulnerable to it?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think, we've all seen those media articles or those shows on A Current Affair or at the Daily Mail, and the media, I don't think, has done a great job in presenting people who are victims of scams and fraud, because I think what we immediately picture is a lonely middle-aged woman sitting in her lounge room, surrounded by all her cats, looking for love on the internet, looking for love on the internet. And then what do you know? All of a sudden, she's transferred her life savings to her foreign prince. Yeah. And we brush past these stories and these articles and we roll our eyes and we think that would never happen to me. I'm smarter than that. Like, what an idiot. And I'm not embarrassed to admit I was one of those people. That's exactly what I thought. And yet here I am. I'm a woman. I lost $317,000 to a man I met on the internet who pretended to love me. And I think, this is the reason I talk to people like you. This is the reason I feel so passionate about getting this message out, because it doesn't matter how well educated you are. It doesn't matter what family you come from. It doesn't matter where you've traveled, where you've worked. It doesn't matter how intuitive you think you are. This can happen to anyone. And, my vulnerabilities, I guess, we all have a lot of vulnerabilities and they aren't always what you think. So, of course, companionship and looking for love and looking to have someone in your life makes you vulnerable, because you want to see the best in people. You want, you get to a place where you want someone in your life. So, of course, when you have your rose-colored glasses on, it's, things get a little blurry. And, but there's other vulnerabilities that everybody experiences. It could be you have too much on your plate and you're doing, 10 things at once, which we're all doing from time to time. And you want to get that thing off your to-do list really quickly. So you just deal with it and it's a scam. Or you could be a high-level executive that's traveling the world through different time zones every other week and you have jet lag. You could have had a big night. One of the most profitable time for scammers to win in the scam game is very early in the morning on a Friday or Saturday morning. So a Friday night or a Saturday night kind of thing.
Right.
Because they know that people may have been out, they might have had a few beers, and they're just not thinking clearly. And I think that's the thing, is that vulnerability comes in so many forms. Maybe you just had a baby and you haven't slept for 3 weeks or 3 months, So I think there's a lot of There's a lot of stereotypes about the type of people that get scammed and why they get scammed. But you only have to start researching this topic to realize that it is everybody from high-level executives, business people, really intelligent people, to kids are getting scammed now. Teenagers are getting scammed because everyone's on their phones, their devices. We're very digital. So I think we're all vulnerable. Humans are vulnerable creatures, and that's just the way it is.
Yeah, and I think you've raised a couple of really good points there. It's not age now. It's teenagers are getting scammed. It's just some of the terrible stories you're hearing around that. But I even just looking at my own past, and this is not now with the internet, it was just late night television and what they were selling you. And I'd get a parcel arrive a week later, and my wife Anne-Marie would say, "What did you buy late?" And I wouldn't even remember what I bought, but obviously at 1 o'clock in the morning, it seemed a really great idea. So
great idea.
Absolutely see what it is. You also raised about and I love that quote from your book, when you're wearing rose-colored glasses, all the red flags are just flags. It really, if you are, and you said it before, feeling you want to see the best in people, if you're especially a glass half full optimist type person, and they just prey on that, don't they?
100%. And even after all of this, I would still rather be a glass half full person. I have an optimism bias. I do think the best of people. I don't go into situations thinking that people are out to get me. That's just not the world that I live in. It's not the world I want to live in. I think what we need to do is we need to be skeptical, but not cynical. And I think there's a really important distinction there. But you're right. When you're wearing rose-colored glasses, all the red flags are just flags. And a lot of people say to me, "What are the red flags? What are the red flags? What's the advice?" And sometimes I think to myself, it's a bit of a funny question, because if they were big red flags at the time, I would have seen them. But they're beige flags. You don't see them at the time. It's only in retrospect that you can go back and think, okay, I missed that. But had it been a big red flag waving in front of my face, I probably wouldn't have done what I did. But yeah, lots of things, lots of dots you can connect in reverse. And I guess that's the value of hindsight.
And is there an example that just comes straight to mind of one of those hindsight moments that you look back and think, "Oh, it's obvious now"?
Yeah, of course. Well, he presented himself as a man by the name of Max Tavita, a chief investment officer for Family Office. And that is the persona he presented to me. And then he, over the course of our almost 18-month relationship, there were a lot of stories. There was a lot of conversation. And from time to time, I would search things up, and it was often very late at night. We'd been out for a meal, and I'd come home and it'd be 11:30, and I'd be trying to look up something he said. It might have been about his parents, or it may have been about a job he had in New York, or it may have been some piece of information that he presented to me, and I would go and look at that and try and find it online. One of the red flags about him was that he didn't have a digital footprint. There was not one thing written on the internet about Max Tavita. Now, of course, that's obvious now, right? Because Max Tavita is a fictional character. But if you're seeing someone or spending time with someone, even within business or a friendship, and they don't have a digital footprint, in this day and age, I think that's a massive red flag. It is one thing not to have a social media footprint. I have girlfriends that don't have social media. It's just, that's fine. That's their choice. But it's very, very unusual not to have a digital footprint. Some article somewhere deep in the internet that mentions your name and can verify who you are. So that's one thing. I think the second,
would he have had, for example, a LinkedIn profile?
He didn't have a LinkedIn profile. And this is the thing. He had been a con artist for 30 years, right? So he had an answer for everything. So when I went to him and said, "Hey, I couldn't find you online," and then there was this big story around why that was, and the jobs he had in the US and his profile over there, and how he wanted to have a simple life back here, and he preferred to fly under the radar, and clearly fly under the radar. But, there was, and it wasn't just, "Oh, I don't believe in LinkedIn, I don't have one." The answers came with these big stories with pieces of data that matched a conversation we had 2 weeks ago or 2 months ago. And so for me, everything just made sense. You know, it was that death by 1,000 cuts, I guess you could say, or that kind of that coercive grooming where, you know, it's those little pieces of information that just sort of add up over time that build a picture that have you believe that they are exactly who they say they are. So yeah, I would say that's a massive red flag. And to be honest, Mark, I did ask, but I didn't push it. You know, I'm in a new relationship with this man. I'm super busy. I'm super stretched. I'm single parenting. I've got a 6-year-old at home. I'm working a big job at eBay. I've barely got time to have a shower every day. And, you know, I'd ask the question, how come you don't have LinkedIn, or why don't you have social media? The big spiel would come, and I didn't push it because I thought, here's a man that I like. We get along famously. There's great connection, great banter, great respect. We love doing the same things. I didn't suspect anything. And so I didn't push hard enough. You know, it didn't, you know, pop off a warning bell in my head for me to go, no, hang on, I want to go back to that. I really want to understand why. Like, you know, does your boss have a LinkedIn profile? You know, and then I would have realized the boss didn't have a LinkedIn profile. Do you know what I mean? So I wasn't bold enough, to be honest, because I was just in this new relationship. I didn't suspect him. And yeah, I probably didn't, you know, I was stretched. And that was my vulnerability as well. I was really, really stretched at the time. I didn't have a lot of time.
Can I ask just on that? Because I also know how friends are sometimes, and even if you don't ask the 20 questions, your friends will ask the 20 questions.
Yeah.
Did he not want to see your friends, or no? How was that side of it?
Now, that was a bit of a red flag as well. So I would also say, as sort of a piece of advice, if you're seeing someone or spending time with someone, if you're not meeting their friends and family pretty quickly, like within a few months, and they're not keen to meet your friends and family, then I would say that's a big red flag, because other people can verify, you know, and you see how they're interacting. And had I have met his friends and family early on, there may have been an occasion where someone called him Hamish. You know, I think in this situation and in my particular personal situation, which suited him perfectly, and probably why I was the perfect target for him, was I was single parenting most of the time on my own. I had very little opportunity. I had very little free time. And I only saw him when I didn't have my daughter with me. She was only 6 at the time. She was really young. And so on those very few odd occasions in that fortnightly block where I had a free night to go and have a meal or go and spend time with him, or whatever it might have been, we just wanted to be together. You know, we were getting to know each other. And, you know, I would say to him, hey, my friends want to meet you, or let's do this. There's something on and we've been invited. And he said, Trace, I barely get to see you. I just want to be with you. And of course, that was music to my ears, you know, who wouldn't want that? I mean, what a great guy. And, you know, he sort of presented it in a way that reflected in a way what I wanted as well. And we were building a relationship. It wasn't like we'd been together for 10 years and, you know, we were looking for things to do on the weekend. So my situation suited him perfectly. The very small periods of time I did have to spend with him face to face, which was kind of, you know, a midweek dinner for a few hours, or every second weekend there may have been a day or a night and a day or something like that. So very, very small amounts of time. And yeah, he leveraged that for sure. And then, of course, when the conversations came about meeting his family, which I was very keen to do after, you know, nearly a year and a half of going out with someone. And it got to the point where it was a sticking point between us. And I said, hey, I really want to meet your sister and your nieces. You talk about them all the time. You know, let's go to Canberra for the weekend and meet them. Or let's, you know, when they're here next, I'll get a babysitter. And, you know, and of course it was always a future promise, like, okay, yeah, we'll do that in 2 weeks' time. And then of course 2 weeks would roll around. There'd be some excuse why we couldn't do it. Or, you know, it'd be a last minute change of plans, or work came up for him and he couldn't go, or whatever it was always an excuse. And in the end, I got a bit upset about it. And I said, I really want to meet them. And he said, look, we're just built differently. Like, you're really close to your friends and family. I was brought up as an orphan. So I just don't have the same needs as you. Like, I don't get it. So it was this kind of, and then of course, he told me the whole story, how he grew up as an orphan. So I had empathy for that. And honestly, Mark, the story's just, it was like a movie, this world he created.
And obviously very good at it, because he didn't trip himself up.
Never. Not once.
Yeah.
Not once. And, like I said, it wasn't an answer like, oh, I just don't have LinkedIn. I don't like LinkedIn. There was a story, and there were facts and details and memories and, and then of course in 2 weeks' time, when he referred back to that conversation, the facts and figures and the memories all lined up. But that was for every story he ever told about his whole life. And this is a guy in his 40s. So on some level, incredibly intelligent, and also keep in mind, he wasn't Max Tavita for anyone else. Yeah. I was the only one that had that persona. And, a chief investment officer for a family office. For someone else, he was a barrister. So he was on that train with them, so he would have had a whole bunch of different stories with that person. And, I just think, gosh, Mark, I can't even remember what I had for breakfast yesterday. It's just, but this is the personality disorder, really.
And I suppose, and you also said earlier, you now talk about this. You like to share so other people will learn. And yeah. I presume that's fairly cathartic, that, you're actually telling this story just helps you grow from this, I suppose, for a better word. Has it, I suppose?
Yeah, 100%, because, and let's remember that I'm 7 years after the event.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah, so when he was first arrested and everything became clear to me, because I didn't even know his real name when he was arrested. So I essentially had to unravel 18 months of my life with him and put it back together in a way that was true, not fake. And so that first year to year and a half after he was arrested, when it was, it was a police case that they were investigating, it was a legal case. So the police couldn't really talk to me. The financial institutions couldn't really talk to me. His friends and family wouldn't talk to me. So I had no information. And on top of that, I was in like the most horrible shame hole of my life, really. I was so ashamed. I was so embarrassed. I was depressed. I was anxious. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't rest. I couldn't eat. It was one of the worst periods of my life. And I've been through, you've read the beginning of the book. I've been through a lot of adversity in my life, and this was probably the worst. And so that first year and a half, if I'm really honest, I was just getting out of bed every day and going to work and getting my kid to school and just trying to deal with all the practical things that were going on in relation to the prosecution of him. But over time, and I think when I met Greg Bearup, who is the investigative journalist for The Australian, I met him about a year after Hamish was arrested. And he was fascinated with the story. And I think at the time he wanted to do just a Weekend Australian article about my experience. And he came along to a hearing one day with me, a plea hearing, where we were finding out whether Hamish was going to plead guilty or not. And he came along to that with me. And it was that day that we got the statement of fact document, which outlined all of the victims in the case, how much money they'd lost, their relationship with Hamish, over what period of time, the extent of his deceit. Everything was laid out, and we got a copy of that document. And that was the moment that I thought, oh my God, it's not just me. Like, I'm not an idiot. These are really smart, wise, older, business people, people from all walks of life, really. And that's when Greg said, I think this is a podcast. And that's when the Who the Hell is Hamish started. And it was through that process that I really learnt literally who he was as a person, the extent of his crimes over the past 20 to 30 years. I met other victims, which was very healing for me. And in doing that podcast and starting to speak about it, I was sort of lifting myself out of a shame hole. My mental health started to improve. And the feedback that I got during that time from strangers, yes, on the internet, but also friends and family who started telling me their own stories of scams and fraud. And it blew my mind. The amount of people that came to me and said, that happened to me, that happened to my parents. And I thought, how is it that you've been in my life for 17 years and we have never had this discussion? How have we never discussed that your father lost millions of dollars to superannuation fraud? And I started to think a lot about that. And then I realized the power in sharing these stories, even if it does expose me as somebody who has gone through something like this. It's actually, it's helpful for other people. And then people start talking about it and releases them of their shame. I can advocate on behalf of victims who aren't comfortable sharing their stories yet. I can work with government and organizations on solutions. I can encourage other people to come forward. So it was cathartic to write the book, but it was so eye-opening to do the podcast and to start this journey way back then, which was 5 years ago now. So
yeah, okay.
That was a very long answer to your question.
No,
sorry.
it was a perfect answer. No, I'm just fascinated and just love, I could listen to you all day, actually. This is just such an interesting, interesting topic, but it's just so helpful for a lot of people. And one of those things that you were sort of touching on, I really would like to know, and why it would be so helpful for people is to rebuild trust in people. As you said, you're a positive person. You like to see the best in people. That must have been a difficult journey to get back to trusting people in relationships or just trusting people in general.
Yeah, 100%. I definitely see the world differently now.
Yeah.
Because I'd never come in contact with anyone like Hamish, that level of evil. It's not my world. It's not where I live. And, yes, trust. I've learned a lot about trust over the last, 7 years. And we're actually biologically wired to trust. Our community and our society operates on a whole bunch of what I call invisible contracts of trust. And I can demonstrate this by saying, you go to the doctor and you go to the GP. I don't know about you, but I've never asked to see their medical degree.
No, funny.
I trust that they have the right qualifications. I trust that they're going to prescribe me the right medicine.
The white coat, so you.
Well, some of them don't. You hop on an aeroplane, you don't swing left into the cockpit with your little portable breathalyzer and make sure the pilots haven't been drinking. You trust that they're operating within the frameworks that we have in our community to keep us protected. You meet someone and they say, "Hi, my name's Tracy Hall." No one stops and says, "Are you?" Because we're so conditioned in a lot of ways to have this invisible contract of trust, because it wouldn't work if we didn't. It'd be an awful place to live. Can you imagine?
Of course.
And so, and then you have all of these biases that, for me, an optimism bias. I believe the best in everything. There is confirmation bias where you cherry pick information from your past to make this true. And he had provided all of that for me. So trust is a very interesting thing when you get to the heart of it, but then trying to rebuild that after you've been so incredibly betrayed was and is still one of the hardest things for me, if I'm really honest. And the other thing is that it's not trusting other people that I have the most problem with, surprisingly. It's trusting myself, because I made the worst decision of my life. I let him into my world. I gave him my life savings. I trusted and believed that everything he said was true. All of those decisions were mine. And yes, it was under deceit. Yes, he was a professional. Yes, he'd been doing this for 30 years, so he was good at his game. But at the end of the day, I made those decisions. And so finding a way over the last 7 years to work out how I can trust myself again, that has been the biggest piece of work that I've had to do. And in doing that, when you trust yourself, then it is actually easier to trust other people as well.
And I'm glad you brought that up, because it did even cross my mind. I was thinking about trusting other people, but of course, trusting your own decisions, trusting your own
judgment.
What you thought judgment would be a tough thing to do, to rebuild that. Okay, so what would be with your own thing? And you've given some really good tips, and people are thinking, gee, I need to watch out for things like this. Is there sort of some other tips or other red flags? I know we're sort of saying they're all rose-colored glasses, they're all flags, but is there something that now in hindsight you look back and you've told us one or two? Is there any others that you still, well, they're obvious, you should really look at those?
Yeah, I think one of the things I talk about is that scammers, and if we talk about sort of scammer businesses, like this is not Barry from Bendigo. These are businesses that are set up with thousands of employees that are using AI and technology to scam as much money out of as many people as possible. They have playbooks, right? And typically the tactics and behaviors are the same. So what a scammer's main aim to do is to get a victim into a heightened emotional state by eliciting one or more of the following emotions. And those emotions are fear. So if you think about, hey, Mum, I've lost my phone, I need money, fear. Or if you don't give me the passwords and we fix this, you're going to lose access to your internet banking, fear. Excitement, great investment opportunity. Here's what you need to do. I'll provide all the details and make it easier. Oh my God, my financial future is going to be great. Hope, which is a really big one at the moment with our cost of living crisis. People are looking for anything to find a way to build and get out of sort of a tight situation. So hope, and then love, of course, which was the situation I was in. And so what the scammers are doing is they're putting you into one of those 4 emotional states. Typically, they're overlaying that with a sense of urgency. So you feel like you've got to do it really quickly. So you're actually, with those 2 things, have less access to your logical thinking. Because in heightened emotional states, what we know is different parts of our brain engage, and we're actually not thinking clearly. And then they get you to act quickly, so you don't have time to stop and reflect and think, is that all right? And then on top of those emotional states and the urgency, you throw in some situational vulnerability. So what we were saying before, you might be tired, you might be busy, you might be doing 10 things at once, you might have 3 kids wanting things from you. It could be any number of things. And you have the perfect petri dish for fraudsters and scammers to, exploit you. And so when I think about red flags, I think about, have a think about situations where something might be presented to you, because it often comes to you. You don't go searching for it, it comes to you, and it puts you into a heightened emotional state. And that's one thing that might trip your brain to go, okay, let me just stop for a minute. I need to validate independently. I'm not going to click on the link. I'm not going to call that number. I'm not going to look at that BSB account number. I'm going to go to the website and check independently. And then I'm just going to take a breath and take a beat. So those red flags, if you're feeling emotional, if someone's trying to get you to act quickly, if they're telling you not to talk to anyone about it, those are the red flags that are typically being used at the moment in scams. And then, if the other thing that's really scary at the moment is the use of AI technology. So you may have heard some of these stories, but essentially the information is, or what they're saying is, the AI technology coming out of these scammer compounds in Southeast Asia are 2 years ahead of any government agency in the world. So they are operating so fast and so aggressively in this space. And so you've got things like voice cloning. So you may pick up the phone, it sounds like your child or your parent asking for money or asking to be helped or whatever it might be. And it's actually not, it's a voice clone of your family member or your partner or whatever. It could be a face clone. So we could be sitting on a call like this and you think you're talking to me, but you're actually talking to a scammer who has cloned my face. It's a deep fake AI and you're suddenly transferring money to me. This happened to an executive in Hong Kong, lost $25 million because he was on a Zoom call with his executive team, or what he thought was his executive team, that were deep fake AI people that looked like his colleagues. And they weren't, they were scammers. He transferred $25 million of his company's money. So there is so much technology coming out. One of the kind of the tips that I give is if you know, you're in a family unit, and whether it's your parents, your children, your partner, whatever it might be, have a family password. So if someone calls you or someone contacts you and is talking about transferring money, or they need help or whatever it might be, then you ask for the password, and unlikely that they'll be able to guess that password. So there are a couple of the things that I would recommend.
Actually,
just thinking
that
about.
last one. Yeah, actually, I think probably for me, because I don't want to hold you up, but this is just a fascinating story.
I'm happy to keep talking.
Is professional help, and not just, I shouldn't say professional help, but just help in general. The help from friends, and I'm just sort of thinking about people who are getting defrauded, potentially say, oh, I'm not sure about this, because one of the vulnerabilities, as you said, is they've got you, there's a sense of urgency. So no, I'm going to hold it. It'd be great to be able to talk to someone, just to say,
Yeah.
what do you think of this? And that,
Yes.
and that person will just say, because there's no emotion, well, of course, that doesn't sound right, or check on this. That must be a tip for people. But even going as far as getting professional help for your mindset, for your finances, getting a financial advisor. I know you definitely had that sort of help come into your life.
Yeah, 100%. One of the tips I do say, it's one of my top 6. Talk about money. Yeah. Money's really still really icky and awkward for a lot of people. We don't like talking about how much money we earn. We don't like talking about where we're investing it. And God forbid we lose money. We don't talk about that. So talk about it. Ask the questions. Go deep. Find someone you can trust in your inner circle to do that. So yes, 100% talk about it. In terms of professional help, the way I explain it is in those sort of weeks, months, and years, to be frank, after Hamish was arrested, I didn't have the capacity to make big decisions. My mind was just a mess. I was in all sorts. And so that was all going on. But I also knew that I had to get really smart really quickly about my money. And I lost everything. I lost $317,000, a 22 career worth of superannuation, tech shares, some savings I had. All I had when he was arrested was my monthly income. I had a job, and it's not lost on me that I had a great job. And I really encourage everyone, for whatever season of life you're in, try and have some sort of, you know, personal income. Because had I not had that, I don't know what would have happened. So I was getting a monthly income, and I knew pretty quickly that I needed help to figure out what I was going to do, because I couldn't see a future for myself, given I'd lost 22 years of my life in terms of savings and you know, retirement funds. So when I found a financial advisor I could trust, I interviewed 3. I went and did reference checks on 3 of their clients each. I went deep into the internet. I looked up the ASIC advisor register. I looked up the banned persons register. I did all the things I should have done when I was working with Hamish, or when I was with Hamish. And I found this incredible woman, and she's still my financial advisor today. And she sat in a room with me and she said, what do you want your life to look like in 2, 5, and 10 years' time from now? And keeping in mind, I could barely see to the end of the day. At this point, I was just one foot in front of the other. Anyway, we sat there and we did it, and we visioned it up. We made a plan. I'm a pretty disciplined person, and I knew I had to be. I stuck to the plan, and she held my hand really, and she said, you're going to be okay, Trace. If you do the things that we've agreed on, you're going to be okay. But the truth is, I never could have done that on my own. I needed her help, and I didn't really fully understand that financial advice and wealth creation and retirement planning included things like getting my will sorted out, making sure I had the right insurances in place in case something happened. There was a lot of pressure on me as a single parent with my child, and I didn't have any of that in place. And I really should have. By the time I hit 40, that was something I really should have had a handle on, but I didn't. I wasn't leaning into my superannuation and my extra contributions. I didn't really understand how I could maximize my career earnings. And so we worked on all of those things over the ensuing few years, and got me to a really good place, because because I lost so much in superannuation, I had to come up with another plan. And she helped me with that. And, so that was incredibly helpful for me. I still have her today, because if anything comes my way in terms of an investment opportunity, I go straight to her.
Yeah.
And she's that extra set of eyes that I trust and I can bounce off and things like that. Had I had a financial advisor when Hamish came into my life, I would have spoken to her about the things he was, asking me to do, because I would have had to go via her. And that would have been maybe a checkpoint that would have, protected me a little bit more. And then in terms of sort of, help for my mindset, I knew I had to get my head straight, because like I said, I think about the world differently now. But I was really conscious that I didn't want it to make me a cynical person, because at the end of the day, Mark, like, most people are good. 99% of people want the best for each other. We all want each other to win, generally. Hamish was operating at the top 1% of psychopathic offenders. I was unlucky to meet him. I was unlucky to come into his orbit and for those things to happen. But I believe most of the world is full of good people who want the best for me and want the best for others. And so that has taken some work, but investing in psychology. At the time I had a lot of therapy. Now I have a mindset coach who just helps keep my, when things get a little wobbly, and thinking about how I operate within the world now that all of these things have happened to me. So that's really helpful for me.
Yeah, and I talk a lot about coaching for people and needing it, and not just financial, even though that's my background, because so many of my conversations over the last 30 years involved a box of tissues on the table.
100%.
And I think, it's the smartest people in business all have mentors, all have coaches. They're the top sports people, all have that. There was a period of life, once we suppose leave our teenagehood or leave school, and we say, we're in the real world now, we can do it all on our own. And it's just the opposite. It's just one of those things, especially with technology and all these things that are going on in our life. Having someone to talk to is just, can make such a difference. One of the biggest myths for me, even just reading the book and talking to you, as I said at the very beginning, you're not what I would have typically pictured as. So that for me is that myth about who they're. Is there some other myths that you've really sort of seen that that's something that's obvious that you might like to talk about, sort of as a final point?
Yeah, I think, look, there's a scam for everybody. There are playbooks that you can buy on the dark web that, is a scam for, a divorced mother with 2 teenage sons, or a widowed 65-year-old man. It is crazy what, the scam for everyone, right? I think seniors, and I love the title of your book, because I always say I feel like I'm in the sandwich generation, so I've got a teenager who I'm trying to teach good money habits to and make her aware of the world. It's all very digital now. And then I've got a 75-year-old mother who is also vulnerable in her own way. And I think seniors, yes, they are being targeted the most at this point in time in Australia, and they're making the most reports, and they're losing the most amount of money. I mean, they've got money to lose, right? They've got their retirement funds. And I was talking to the head of fraud at one of the big banks, and he said to me, you might be surprised to know that the most common person to be scammed is a man in his 60s. And that was very interesting to me, because again, it takes it away from that visual image we have of a lonely middle-aged woman. And, you know, the retirees are the ones that I feel the most passionate about. There were some retirees that lost money to Hamish as part of the case I was involved in, lots, like over $1 million. And they went from, you know, working very, very hard their whole life, bringing up disabled grandchildren, the whole thing, to, you know, they were going to have a comfortable retirement. And so they should have. They worked really hard, to the point where Hamish stole all their money and they couldn't figure out how they were going to buy groceries every week. And that just broke my heart, because I've still got, you know, another 20 years of work left in me. I can make that money back. The money is not the hardest thing for me. I think if you work hard, you've got the right mindset, and you're motivated, you can make money. They, you know, they're in their late 60s, early 70s. They're not going to work again. And it just breaks my heart that that happens. And I think there's a job to be done for the seniors of Australia. I've actually written a 3-hour workshop, which is a very practical, hands-on workshop. I literally want to go into community centres and teach them how to set up two-factor authentication, what scams to look out for, how to do a reverse image search if they're buying something off a marketplace. You know, there are so many very, very simple things that we can teach and show people that is going to help them be more confident. Because the other thing is, they're all really scared. Because they're like, you know, I'm not going to click on that email. I'm not going to click on that link. And what you don't want is a community of seniors walking around being afraid of the world, you know? So they are a group that are very vulnerable from a technology point of view, but also, you know, they've got money to lose. And so, and very little time to rectify any financial losses. So I'm super passionate about getting that workshop out to as many seniors as possible. And, you know, go and sit and have a cup of tea, and even, you know, worksheets for children to go and sit with their parents and go, here are the 5 steps to set up XYZ. So there's lots of very practical things that can be done.
And I think it's sort of one of those things, in hindsight, it does actually make sense, especially a lot of the clients I saw in their 50s and 60s, or 60s, say 60s and 70s, it would be the men, because they've, a lot of the women at that age at least admit, I was never the one who looked after the finances, whereas their husband, absolutely, and I should be able to do this. I'm smart enough to do this because I've done this my life. And so, you know, the smarter you are, sometimes the more susceptible you are too.
Because you're blind. You're blind to it. I hear this a lot from banks and payment platforms, where there are call centers and frontline workers that they might suspect a scam is going on. So they will put a halt on the transfer, on the transaction, and they will outreach to the customer and say, hey, we believe this to be a scam. Can you check XYZ? And the amount of people that basically come back to them and say no, you know, and men is what I've heard, because they're so convinced that they're making the right decision. They don't want to be making the wrong decision. They don't want to be wrong. And, you know, even with someone saying, we believe this to be a scam, I think you should not go ahead with this transaction. They go ahead with it anyway. And, you know, because regulation in Australia, if a customer instructs a bank to do something, they have to do it. So, you know, I hear a lot of these stories, and there is a lot of bank bashing that goes on, and I think there's more work to be done. There is a lot of work happening, but there are also a lot of stories where, you know, people are warned, but they have sort of this betrayal blindness going on, and they want to go ahead with the transaction anyway. So it's a shame. But again, I think this is where education is key. And the more we talk about it, the more we talk about money, the more we talk about these stories, it might just flick in someone's head, just a little memory to go, oh yeah, I heard that story. Maybe that's me as well.
And, you know, have someone you can talk to about it. You know, just to say, okay, you know, it's a mate, it's an advisor, it's a coach, whoever it is, but just someone you feel like, oh, I'm just not sure about this. I feel confident enough to go talk to that person. And there's a friend of mine who I was talking about something or other, and you know, the way I was raised, you don't show emotion, you don't talk about your feelings and all those sort of things. And he pulled me up afterwards and said, I'd be really offended if you didn't feel like you could come to me and talk about it, which I thought was great, but I would never have done that. So people my age, or men, middle-aged men, we really do need to get better at this. And I'm believe, millennials and Gen Xers are definitely better at this than we are, but it's we're all vulnerable. As you said, there's playbooks for every age group. One question I'd like to ask, because you've covered a lot, and it really is, and I do encourage everyone to read your book, and also any links you have, I'll put definitely down below at the end of this podcast. You've given us a lot of advice. What's maybe the best piece of advice you've heard?
The best piece of advice that comes to mind is like, my mum gave me this piece of advice, and she said, don't complain if you don't contribute. And I love that piece of advice because it forms the bedrock of so many things when you think about your life. And it is actually the inspiration that I have to volunteer. And I think because my mum has always volunteered, she had 3 kids, really busy career life, the whole thing. And she always volunteered. And I've kind of done that in my life as well. And I think it's really easy to sit there and go, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong. But what's the point in complaining if you're not doing something about it to fix it or to contribute? And I think that's a really, people are very, very happy to sit and tell you everything that's wrong with the world, but what are they actually doing? And then if I sort of think about what I'm doing now, it's exactly that. I can sit there and say, well, the bank should have done more, or the superannuation company shouldn't have let me transfer it out, and, point the finger at everyone. And realistically, there's nothing that could have been done. But what I want to do now is contribute back by saying, okay, this happened. Here's what we can do about it. Here's how I can use my time, my energy, my skills to educate others. And I think it's a really, even if you've got kids at school and there's no activities happening at school for the parents, well, go make it happen. If you want something to happen, go contribute. So I thought that was a really great piece of advice that it's stuck with me always, actually.
And you are definitely living it. And I think it's a great way to end this podcast. So, Tracy, thank you so much for being on the show, for sharing, and just so much help you've provided in today's show.
Oh, you're so welcome. Thank you for having me.
I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you'd like to know more about Tracy and her story, purchase her memoir, The Last Victim, or listen to her podcast, Who the Hell is Hamish, just go to tracyhall.com.au. Or feel free to email me on admin@themoneysandwich.com or visit our website, themoneysandwich.com, if you have any questions or would like to learn more. Visit my website, themoneysandwich.com, for free templates, online calculators, and subscribe to our newsletter to help you now for a better retirement tomorrow. As with every podcast, this information is not advice, as not personalised to your own situation. And past performance is never guaranteed for the future. What we are trying to do here is to provide tips, coaching and education to help improve your money knowledge, which we believe can only be a good thing. See you next time when we take another bite from The Money Sandwich.